As Best Buck Summer rolls on, we inch nearer and nearer each day to our next hockey season. And as we get closer, we see many new faces. Some avid hockey fans, and some are just degenerates that want to continue to draft even after the NFL best ball drafting season's over. And I welcome each and every one of you to join us on our mission to fill all of the NHL lobbies. And I want to offer you the tools, the resources, the stats that are going to help you win each and every draft and hopefully have a chance at that 25K up top prize in the Best Buck Classic. This series will be division by division, going over each and every team's top player by ADP, going over who to pair with them, to spare, and potentially leave off or not reach at ADP, and to beware of and maybe not draft at all. I'll be breaking down each and every team and their top players. Some might not really be all that draftable, and some are going to have tons of guys and tons of options. But gather around, get some popcorn, and get ready to talk about the best sport and the best way to play it on Underdog Fantasy. That is the NHL Best Buck. We begin this series in Boston, where David Pastrnak is currently going fourth overall in our Best Buck Classic drafts. And with that kind of massive capital you need to spend, you're going to want a big return on investment. So, of course, let's look at the players who might be worth grabbing. The first player getting drafted after Pastrnak is Brad Marchand. I have him in the spares category. It's a guy that, of course, you could draft with him because of the power play connection, but that's really what you're drafting on. He had 19 points at 5-on-5 alongside Pastrnak compared to 29 on the power play, which is a pretty big margin. And I think to bet as much capital as that is, you're not getting the return on investment you need. And there's other guys down the line that I think are better. The first one being Charlie McAvoy, who was disappointing last season, disappointing in the playoffs, but second on the team in time on ice at 5-on-5 with Pastrnak. I think that trend only grows. It was more than 140 minutes or right around there. At 5-on-5, he played over anyone else other than Pavel Zacha. So that's a lot. That's over 2 games worth. And I just think that trend continues. And again, the power play should hopefully run through McAvoy, where he didn't get a ton of points. Our third player, Elias Lindholm, is the guy they signed and gave all the money to play alongside and center David Pastrnak and reach his upside. It just makes so much sense that if you're betting on Pastrnak, his center, who I do think has a lot of skill, is going to get carried along with him. So I'm in on this connection. It's, again, you're betting on that being his center, which I think is strong, but keep an eye on it. And the guy that loses that role is probably Pavel Zacha, who, is just no longer going to be the center in Boston. He didn't really get dragged to fantasy relevance last year, yet is still listed as a center in this format. I think that makes him undraftable because he didn't get there last year, and I only think he's going to lose run from here on out. So that's going to do it for Boston.
Next, we have my favorite team, the Buffalo Sabres, and unfortunately, they have a defenseman in Rasmus Dahlin up top. There's 4 guys that obviously you compare him with. First is Tage Thompson, and I think that really this entire segment is just going to be in me saying that all of them are fine and none of them are great at ADP. Tage Thompson is just going a bit early to feel really good about the opportunity cost of taking a center and defenseman both before pick 60. That's the only caveat. I think he's the best option, but the price is high. Alex Tuch as well. Last year, he was technically third on the team in 5-on-5 points when paired with Rasmus Dahlin, but that was to Samuelsson and Casey Middlestad, one of them being a defenseman and one of them being no longer with the Sabres. So fine, whatever. Him, Peterka, and Tage were all 1 point apart from each other as far as 5-on-5 points with Dahlin. And again, I just think Tuch's going a bit early. Like, it's fine. Same with Peterka, a guy that I was drafting in every draft to start the best puck lobbies, has quickly shifted into a bit of a reach at ADP in the 100s. But again, like, none of these are bad picks. All of them are totally justifiable. I just think that every one of these Sabres, and frankly, including my highest exposure player and Dylan Cousins, are all going maybe just a touch early and shouldn't be forced in with Rasmus Dahlin, but certainly keep an eye on it, use the star method and draft them at ADP or after. But I think all of the Dahlin hype is forcing him up the ladder just a bit too much. So all of them are spares in my opinion, but not to say that any of them are bad picks. Just all of them should be taken with a grain of salt. And I think every one of these 4 is going a bit high for my liking.
We head over next to the Motor City in Detroit, where once again, this is going to be a bit of a mess, but I'm trying to be as open and honest as possible about exactly how I feel about each and every one of these players. Going to Alex DeBrincat is the first player being picked in Detroit. I think you should be aware of Lucas Raymond, but maybe not for the reasons you think. I do think that the way that you're drafting DeBrincat and he gets there is because Raymond is not on Larkin's wing. I don't really see that as a triple connection altogether. If you're betting on Alex DeBrincat, I think that's a direct bet against Raymond being the number one winger, but it is a bet on him going with Dylan Larkin, which is into the pair category. Like if you are making that bet on DeBrincat, you're thinking about the beginning of last season where they were probably the most lethal combo in all of fantasy in DeBrincat and Larkin before that magic went away, before the power play role went away for DeBrincat. And eventually, like I'm saying, I don't know if they're all going to correlate together. I highly doubt it. Maybe with some more clarity on that situation, we could consider Raymond going with them both. But I think you're really, if you're betting on DeBrincat, you're betting on Larkin, you're betting on Mo Sider on that top power play because you're very much saying that this is a power play one player who, again, lost the role last year in DeBrincat to go along with Mo Sider, to go along with Larkin, is the only way he's going to get there at around the 60 to 70 range. I just don't really see Raymond fitting in on the wing. I think it's going to be Tarasenko personally. And lastly, it's Patrick Kane. Again, I don't think it's going to be either of those two wingers with him, and both of them could eat away his power play role. So all of that being said, I would be aware of Alex DeBrincat in general because I'm betting on his role being diminished, Kane continuing to be the power play one guy, and Raymond, the magic that him and Larkin had last year, continuing. So I think to beware of DeBrincat is the answer here and focus on all of the other four. But if you are drafting DeBrincat, which is the point of this exercise, I would go with Larkin. I would go with Mo Sider, and I would definitely avoid Raymond and probably Kane. I think there's at least an argument to be made that like somehow they could get together, but I really don't think that Raymond's going to find his way onto the wing with him as well. Next, we have the Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers with Matt Tkachuk going at about the 11 to 12 turn from round one into round two, which is kind of why we have to put Sam Reinhart here in the spares category. You're just not reaching up that high to take Sam Reinhart over a lot of these other players that go in that range. Of course, if Reinhart slips to you in the third round, that makes a lot of sense. You get the Chuck, one of the top wingers or defensemen, then come back and get Reinhart. You might limit yourself at goalie, but that would make a ton of sense. I just don't think you're jumping up that high to get a guy that correlated incredibly low at 5-on-5, when in reality, all of the 5-on-5 run went with Verhaeghe as well as the power play time. So that's how you're going to reach that value of a first in the second round pick in Matt Tkachuk is with a guy like Carter Verhaeghe who can score 30 or 40 goals off Matt Tkachuk. And also really distribute to him and drive offense together. You kind of need all of that to come together. Whereas Reinhart and Barkov are power play dependent as far as getting there with Matt Tkachuk. I just don't think you need to jump the line to get that kind of exposure, especially when both Reinhart and Barkov need the Chuck distributing to them on the power play to kind of hit their peaks, which doesn't make me feel as good about like this perfect scenario. You're kind of threading this extra needle of power play run. I think is unnecessary. The majority of the Chuck's minutes will be played with Verhaeghe and Gustav Forsling. There will be someone else mixed in. He mixed in with a number of guys last year. So I'm not going to play the guessing game here. You don't need to in this format. Just take the two guys that are going to play with him the most in Forsling and Carter Verhaeghe, and the rest will fall into place. If you get that slip of Barkov or Reinhart and you want to try to go for that power play upside, have at it, but I think it's unnecessary. So I'm all in on the Verhaeghe, the Chuck, but then again, all that being said, I'm not drafting a ton of Matt the Chuck at his current price. Another one that really writes itself is in Montreal with Cole Caulfield, a guy that I am really, really high on. I was really high on last year, and I'm going to continue. First, we have Uri Slafkovsky, who just really came out of his shell and became the first round overall draft pick that we hoped for. He's a great power forward. We saw some shooting. We saw some ability to score and really lock in a power play one role. There's no reason why you can't draft both of them together. It's not my main priority when I'm getting Cole Caulfield, who I want to take him with, but it's definitely up there. Next, Mike Matheson. I think it's a spare just because I do have a little bit of concern about Lane Hudson taking over a bit of his power play run. I think he's fine where he's going, but I don't think it's incredibly necessary. And it's kind of more the situation of like, if that's your first defenseman in, I'm a little bit concerned. You are maybe giving yourself a bad opportunity of missing out on the most important piece to go with Cole Caulfield, which is Nick Suzuki. And that's a guy that I'm just could not be more in on when I draft Cole Caulfield. Nick Suzuki is just moving up, and I'm taking him before ADP often. It's just like, how does that peak get there? That's together. This team is just, there is only a couple other teams that we're going to discuss that are even remotely close. I think this still might be the number one team as far as this is the team. I mean, this is it. This is how they get there. That's why the entire rest of the team is in beware. There's not another player on Montreal that I'm even considering drafting after maybe Lane Hudson, which I'm really not even considering drafting. Um, not, the next forward after Uri Slafkovsky at 5-on-5, time on ice with Cole Caulfield was Christian Dvorak at an eighth of the minutes. No one touches the ice with Cole Caulfield other than Slafkovsky and Nick Suzuki and all the defensemen, of course. But like, if you're reaching your peak level of Cole Caulfield, which you're drafting him in the second round, he has to get there. It is coming on the back of Nick Suzuki. So I think you're definitely jumping the line and taking that guy to reach his best potential. We head to Ottawa. Well, as a Sabres fan, I know a thing or two about having an incredibly disappointing team to follow. So why don't we talk about the Ottawa Senators? The Brady the Chuck situation is very interesting. Of course, it's no shocker. The guy that you want to pair him with is Tim Stützle. That situation, I think, is really where the ambiguity stops. Everything else feels pretty up in the air in so many different capacities. But I think the Brady Stützle situation is going to be locked in. That's the correlation you want. It used to be cheaper. It's getting more expensive. What can you do about it? I just don't think you need to force anything else, which is why when Drake Batherson comes up, I think eventually he could move closer to that pairs category. But as of right now, we have Pinto, Norris, and Stützle. Stützle will probably be with Brady. Who's going to be with Pinto? Who's going to be with Josh Norris if he is indeed back, which we're expecting? I just don't think there's any reason to jump the line that high to get Drake Batherson when we don't know if he's going to be on the first power play. We don't know if he's going to be on a line with Brady. They have correlated in the past, but we don't know what this new coach is going to do. Sanderson it was almost impossible to put. I just feel like there is no one you have to pair with Brady other than Tim Stützle. If you miss on Stützle, I think you try to probably jump on Sando to reach the upside of your fifth or sixth or seventh overall guy in Brady the Chuck. Again, Matt's gone over it in detail why he thinks he's going a little bit too high, but you probably want someone. I don't know if you need it. I don't think it's Claude Giroux, though, a guy that I just really, with all the guys I named, I don't see how he gets on that first power play, which is really how Brady's probably going to get there in any window. Brady has to score a lot more goals. That's going to have to come on the back of a lot of 5-on-5 time with whoever he's with. So you're going to have to figure that out first. I think Sanderson, I may have been a little bit low on this, but I just feel like it's one of those situations where I feel disingenuous saying jump the line and get Sanderson here because you have to pair someone with Brady. That might be wrong. I think where Sanderson's going, it's a fine value, so it's fine to take. But I just don't think it's like, oh, this is clearly going to be the situation you have to have here. Because what if he does lose it to Shabbat? It just feels like there's enough ambiguity where he's right on that line. He might move over to the pairs category, but everything else I feel pretty good about here. We head out to Tampa, where my MVP, the guy that I think should have won the MVP of the league, Nikita Kucherov, is going around that 5 or 6 overall, mainly the 5th overall position. And there's quite a bit of star power at the top of drafts to stack him with. The first being Jake Gensel. I'm fine with it. I really am. I have taken it a few times. And as he's slipped more and more, I think you just wait on him as much as possible. You're very unlikely going to get him in the third round. But if you get some exposure with Kucherov and some without, I think you're going to kind of spread that out a bit. If you're always locking that in together, I just worry that Gensel's not that good, and there's a lot of better players around him. And it's kind of the same thing magnified with Braden Point, where he's going at like 40 to 43. And in some lobbies earlier than that, as people reach way up the board for centers, I just don't think you ever want to reach on a center that early. You're eating way too much at a prime goalie position. And that's where I'm taking my goalies time and time again. I'd rather try to win goalie. So when he slips, 100%. I don't even think it's a spare as much as a don't take him where he's going. Whereas a guy like Victor Hedman is going a bit early, but I think if that's your first defenseman in to go with Kucherov, that is really meeting the upside. And then in that entire situation in Tampa, where the power play one is wide open to Victor Hedman, there's no one else that's really going to eat much of his minutes at all as they traded Sergachev away. I think that is complete wheels up. Let's go. And then, the last guy, Brandon Hagel. Yeah, I mean, Hagel's great. If we get news in camp that he's with Kucherov and Point instead of Gensel, absolutely just completely swings in the pairs category. No second thought about it at all. But where he is going to be is probably with Cirelli in that second line, and whatever. We're just not doing that. But yeah, love Kucherov. I think all of these players are, besides honestly probably Hagel, who's not going to see 5-on-5 or power play time with Kucherov most likely. But Gensel and Point are great pairs, just not where they're going at ADP. So I'm going to just kind of look to just get Victor Hedman as much as possible. last in the Atlantic, we go to Toronto, and I apologize for my green St. Pat's jersey against this here green screen. Not really looking like much. It's just sort of makes my look like my neck's invisible. But when we go to Toronto, I think we have one of the more unique situations in all of Underdog where you have one of the elite centers in Austin Matthews, a guy that is right up there with McKinnon and McDavid, but you can actually stack him, which is unique. I mean, that's just not something you can do. And of course, it's maybe not as ideal as perfect as possible because William Nylander, who again might not be his 5-on-5 line mate, but we'll see run. Almost impossible to get with him, which kind of feels like McKinnon with Rantanen, but you also can't get his defenseman. So you're going to get a much weaker correlation, but you can almost always get Mitchell Marner. So you can almost always get your best bet to see the most optimal outcome of Austin Matthews getting there and Mitchell Marner, who I think you're just very likely going to want to pair. I think it's fine to try to sneak a couple by, see if you can't here or there. If you get Austin Matthews, take one of the goalies if they slip or another winger and try for Mitchell Marner in the third round. You'll be punished often, but I think it's definitely a correlation you want to take advantage of because it's just not something you get a lot of access to with these. Well, really, if any of the three top guys, getting Hyman with McDavid is nearly impossible. I already said getting Rantanen with McKinnon literally is impossible. And there's just no need to stack John Tavares. He took the captaincy off his chest. And to be frank, I just think Tavares is fine where he's going. He's a fine pick, but really the upside is getting much, much lower, which is why he's going in the 120 range now. So when you're taking Austin Matthews, I think you can take any of the top three guys in Toronto outside of John Tavares, which is Morgan Riley as well. I think Morgan Riley is a really good value, honestly. I don't really get it. There's not a lot of competition there to take any of his offensive run. So why not bet on Morgan Riley, a guy that I definitely think has massive point upside. And if Austin Matthews is getting there, it's through goals. And those goals are going to come from Mitchell Marner and Morgan Riley more than anyone else. So I think this is a really good buy spot compared to anyone else from the division.